the idle air control valve, make sure that your air mass meter is in good condition, but the low vacuum is weird. So what are you reading? What is your vacuum reading at idle?
I think it's about 6.
Yeah, that's not good. So I think that around, I mean, it depends kind of on what's happening with the idle air control motor and all that stuff, but I would expect something in the neighborhood of 15, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would check the purge valve too. I've seen them screw up sometimes.
Okay. But
How would you know, Chris, if it was the purge valve, would there be any other indicators, Chris?
Pinching off the vacuum line to the purge valve when your idle's high, if that brought down, then you know the purge valve was sticking open.
I've you mentioned the air mass meter. I've had to replace that more than once, and I'm not finding any of them anymore. Anybody have a source for that, or someone that is reliable in rebuilding them?
Yeah, I just jump in to say for people who are on the phone or computer, you should be able to, anybody on a phone can unmute or unmute themselves using *6 if you want to jump into the conversation. And I believe participants on the computers can go ahead and unmute themselves, or you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you if you want to jump in.
So I had, as a technician, really a lot of problems with many aftermarket air mass meters and mass airflow meters. But there was a company, Tom's, I think, that I used a couple times for classic 900s and other stuff. If I remember correctly, that was the name of it. And I vaguely remember like a blue and white box and having pretty good experiences with their stuff. But it seems like, 90% of the time, any aftermarket air mass meter, you're just really going to have problems with it. Those hot wire mass meters are tricky little guys.
You say a company called Tom's?
I believe so. Yeah, I could be wrong, but I vaguely remember about that.
Any idea where they're located?
I would just Google it, right?
TOM''S?
Sure. That's what I remember.
Okay. Yeah, I had asked my mechanic this, and I found a place and said, gee, do you think we should try one of these? He said, I have in the past, and I got 3 bad ones before I got 1 good one.
Right. Yeah, and that's pretty par for the course, particularly, like I said, the hot wire air mass meters are very sensitive, guys, and they, the programming is very particular to a certain air mass meter and all that stuff. And, particularly in the later systems, because I worked with the actual mapping in the ROM, that they had I think it was the only 16 by 16 table in there was like an air mass map, or it was the only 16-bit map in the file, or one of very few anyway. Most of it was like 8-bit stuff. The resolution was much lower, but they're very sensitive, to having the right air mass meter in them, those old LH systems,
Yeah, I also have a 91 turbo, and I was thinking about just trying to swap out different components and see, does it solve the problem in the 93, or if I put the other components from the 93 and 91, does it exhibit the same problem that I had in the 93?
Right. Yeah, if they have the same part number, you can do that. And I would just kind of go back to what Chris was saying, check for vacuum leaks by pinching off hoses and,
yeah, we've done
right. And then recheck your cam timing if the vacuum's really low like that, you have something going on, but that's a big, telltale red flag right there. So.
Yeah,
Bill Hansen wrote in the chat online that the Injection Labs in Boulder, Colorado checks and rebuilds them. Injection Labs
Wow.
Injection labs for the air mass meter.
in Boulder, Colorado. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. I just want to mention that I've had very good experience for the last 20 years. It's been a long time with Goldwing. Josh was supposed to be on today from Goldwing. They have a wide selection of Saab parts. They've always treated me with really high integrity. They'll return something. They're very diligent. They stand by what they do. And Josh will be on our next show. And I just want to say a shout out to Goldwing. And also I had this question, which I wanted to run by Jack and Chris. There's several people interested. And I think, Jack, it's interesting because you're a current BMW mechanic. I'd love you to make a contrasting comment for this question. People that have listened to our show and have spoken to me or Scott, and by the way, my experience dealing with SaabNet people is incredible. I literally become such good friends. The last Saab that I got was a 9.5 from Jerry McDonald. And when he bought me the car, he had just bought a brand new Tesla, and he was so excited to show me the 9.5. Before I left the parking lot, he gave me $20 for Irish good luck. I meet wonderful people on SaabNet. So take your time when you're looking for a car. Get to know the person. Hear the mechanic history. Get their passion. You know, you're not going to get ripped off if you really get a sense of who they are and how they treated the car. People get ripped off because they're not really paying attention. And what I love about SaabNet is usually it's people who are committed to Saab. And it really comes across very different in the wide open market. Okay, the people who want to buy, not a brand new, but they want to buy a 900. What are the signs of a really good used 900? And Jack, maybe you could comment on this too. And people want to know, is it so it's always been a classic safe car. By today's standards, does it still hold that same safety? And by today's standards, it's still an amazing performance car in its own unique category. And what want to get your recommendations or comments about getting a used one. We're heading into summer, and a lot of people still think it'd be great to have a convertible. Any comments about getting a used 900? Cautions, optimistic points. I want to open that up as well. Let's go with Chris. Go first. I want to get your take over there in beautiful Dorset, Vermont.
Well, in this part of the country, you're looking a lot at rust, especially where the control arm hooks on, lower control arm on the right-hand side of the body. That's where they tend to go. They tend to rust out there. Other than that, if you have somebody who's, there's a lot of people out there that don't drive the cars during the winter, in which case you just want to really look for, if you have somebody like that, the car is probably going to be in pretty good shape because they're taking care of it. Other than that, just as long as the maintenance has been done on the car, it's been kept up with. I've got a car here now, a 91 convertible. It's just got 217,000 miles on it. And that car, I just drove it. It's in really nice shape. It's nice and tight. And the guy is just like, when he comes in, it's pretty much, whatever it needs. So, I would have no problem buying that car from somebody like that.
And what about safety and longevity? So 200,000 miles plus, could we count on, or could we maybe get 300, 400,000 miles and really enjoy that car and take it on long trips? Is that possible?
Well, it's possible, but like any old, 20, 30, 40-year-old car. It's on a long trip, if you break down somewhere, trying to find somebody who can work on it, trying to get parts, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible to do, but that's why people buy new cars, because they're, more dependable.
Mm-hmm.
But for something that's been taken care of, you have a lot better chance than something that hasn't been, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Jack, I was curious. So you work on modern day BMWs?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
That's what I do.
What would you say? Every day, it's funny. Your enthusiasm level when you talked about the BMWs was so. It wasn't near which I feel when you talk about. I still feel your enthusiasm and your sense of the soul of Saab. What's your comment for someone's listening and they understand you're a master tuner or a master mechanic? My next car most likely, although I'm still at the next level, bringing up the standard, my 9.5. 2004 with Chris, which I love doing. I love that car. The other two cars, the other car that intrigued me is the 9000, which I love as well. What's your comment about getting an older car with the mentality? Like the doctor that bought my SPG, he said to me, Glenn, my wife doesn't want me to get a new Porsche, but she said, go ahead and put $15,000 into the SPG. What about a radical transformation? Because Chris just, shared the concerns. Is there an upside of like putting a really significant financial investment in, let's say, an older 900?
So that's a good question. And what I would say about that is a car is basically what it's worth. What it's worth is what it's worth to the owner, right? So you'll have one person with a car who, the car breaks down a couple times and they're sick of it and they, let it go or whatever. And,
right.
you have somebody else who really loves the car and is willing to put in whatever it takes, So like, if I was looking to buy a classic 900, I agree with everything that Chris said. I would try and get one from somebody who really loved it and took care of it and had a lot of service records and all that stuff. I would drive the car. I would accelerate pretty hard in reverse and see if it popped out of reverse gear, put it through all the gears, listen to the transmission very carefully. I know that all the probably 91 and later classic 900 transmissions were fairly noisier than the earlier ones. It was told to me by an old, I met these guys up in Connecticut that had this little hole in the wall shop. And it was told to me that Saab used to do this thing where they had a little transmission dynamometer, and they would put each transmission on this dynamometer and they would run it through the gears, but they would also had microphones and would listen to it. And if it was too noisy, they would take it apart and use gears and other transmissions that had better matches. And so the transmissions were fairly quiet. And then around 90 or something like that, they basically stopped doing that and just kind of threw them together. And they may have run them through the gears or whatever to make sure everything worked, but they weren't worried about sound. So this was what was explained to me. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but that's what I was told. And so they, so a later one, you may have some whine from it or whatever, but, you want to listen for pinion whine, that sound that sort of increases in, it increases in speed, with the vehicle's speed, and is in kind of all the gears, maybe, goes away a little in fourth and comes back in fifth, and this popping out of reverse thing, especially the older ones had the transmission had that smaller pinion bearing, and they were more prone to failure. The later ones, they I think around maybe 88 or something like that, or 89. Yeah. Maybe it was right around the time they stopped listening to them. They put the bigger pinion bearing in it. But and those are a little bit stronger transmissions, and so, I would just really pay attention about the transmission. The engines are pretty bulletproof. They just have some little bit of oil leak stuff, just I would look for oil leaks and that kind of thing. But all of that stuff, when you buy an older car, is stuff that you're going to have to deal with. And so to the individual who purchases the car, to say, yeah, okay, I'm going to buy this car and maybe I'm going to spend $5,000, say,
right.
If they have a really very classic 900, and I'm willing to allocate another $5,000 or $10,000 to straightening it out. And then you bring it to somebody like Chris, who knows the car really well and, has some integrity and can guide them through the important parts of getting it back together. I think a car could be made quite reliable. I'm sitting in a 300,000 mile E30, a 1989 BMW 325i that I drift on the track, that I beat the piss out of. And I drove it from Lexington, Kentucky up to Ohio to look at a mill and a lathe, and I'm going to drive it back. And it has a standalone engine management and a bunch of stuff that nobody I could not get parts for this car. It's like a one-off kind of handmade thing, you know. And if I got stuck, I'd have to call my wife with the truck and trailer to come get me. But I trust the car. I've been over it very thoroughly. It's proven itself on the track and on the road. And I think that you kind of get that trust for a car. And if you have a good, you know, technician like Chris, you know, a good indie like that who's going to take care of you, your chances of, you know, having successful long trips and trust in the car that it's not going to break down are going to be a lot better, you know?
I have just a quick comment about what Chris said about rust. I have actually two comments. So one about what Jack said about going through the gears. Just to add one more test to that, I find that if you do run through the gears on a hill, both forwards and backwards, and see if it pops out, the hill puts a little more stress on it. But it's a good indication that, you know, if it's popping out, especially a reverse, you know, there's something coming. And the other thing is, I just want to mention, so I brought my 85 900 sedan base. I drove it from New Hampshire out to California after college. And I had a great mechanic out here, Laszlo of Laszlo's Auto Repair. He's on Old Middlefield Way in Mountain View, California. Super fantastic Indy, especially on the classic 900. And he had worked on my 900 a few times, and we had a cup of coffee. We were chatting about Saabs, and he said, "I'm sorry, Scott." He saw the underside of the Saab, which had been, you know, driven many winters in the Northeast. He said, "I'm sorry, Saab. I'm sorry, Scott, but your Saab has a dirty soul." He was not impressed being out here in California with the amount of rust that was on the other side of the car. But I think Rick Foster has his hand raised, so he's up next with a question. Go ahead, Rick.
Hi, thanks. I just want to circle back to Scott Burnell. Did you notice that your idle problem happened regardless of whether the engine was hot or cold?
Let me see if he's still here.
It doesn't make a difference.
Doesn't make a difference. Okay.
It's not.
I've had vacuum problems that everything looked fine and ran good when it was cold. When it heated up, I still couldn't hear any hiss, but that's when the problems happened. And I just was curious. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Glenn, you got muted for a second there. There, Glenn, you're unmuted.
Oh, thank you.
If anybody has a question, wants to jump in, if you're on a phone, it's *6 to unmute yourself. If you're on the computer, you can unmute yourself or raise your hand and I'll unmute you.
One of the things I think we could mention about Jack is he's kind of like a known gunslinger. A lot of people know you as a tuner. Do you want to make any comments about being a tuner?
I have a bit of a story, actually, aside from the tuning stuff. That
okay.
So it's like how I came into Saabs, you know, basically.
Please.
So I'm a West Coast guy, you know. I was born in San Francisco, and I left the city and lived most of my adult life in the coastal mountains of California. And I moved from Mendocino County, California on the coast to Asheville, North Carolina in the year 2000. And anyway, I went to work. I worked for myself mostly as a mobile mechanic. I lived in Santa Cruz and I lived in Mendocino, and I worked off a service truck, and I worked on all kinds of equipment and cars and things like that. And, you know, it was like a low overhead business. I had a lot of freedom, and it was awesome in a lot of ways.
Wow.
But I worked out in the weather and whatever. And there was parts of it that was really hard. But in Santa Cruz, I had a pager. I'd leave it in the truck and I'd go surf for like 2 hours and get out and check my pager. You know what I mean? It was like, and if I had work, I'd go do it and I'd get the parts and knock the work out. And then I'd go back and surf, you know, and it was really awesome. But I moved to North Carolina in the year 2000, and I was hired by the shop as their lead Asian tech. And I've been working on cars since I was 15 years old. I've worked in shops, and I'm 53 now. So I've been in the trade a pretty long time, and had been as well in the year 2000, right? I'd been in the trade for quite a while. So I was hired as their lead Asian tech, and they did like 30% Asian and like 70% European. It was a really nice shop in Asheville, North Carolina called Precision International. And Randy Richards, the owner of this place, was a big Saab nerd. He was really into Saabs. And I didn't really know much about them at the time. And so when I moved there, I had a big service truck and I had a motorcycle. But I didn't have a good car for commuting back and forth from Black Mountain, this little town that I lived in, to Asheville. It was about 20 minutes away or something. And so sitting out in the parking lot was this 85 SPG that was abandoned. Somebody had, I guess it burned oil, and they'd replaced the engine and transmission, both of which were bad. They took a bad engine. The transmission popped out of reverse. And the engine, I think, must have, after when I took it apart and looked at it, it looked like it maybe had a blown head gasket and run with a lot of coolant in the oil because the bearing shells were delaminated, and, you know, it had all these issues, like internal issues. The engine was very, very worn out, you know, and which is rare for a Saab engine. So you know, I'm basically given this car. They had to get their attorney to do some weird stuff to make it available because there was no title on the car and everything, but it was made available to me. And what the root cause of the problem was that the turbo had failed, and they removed the turbo and they welded this right angle pipe from the exhaust manifold, making that 180 degree from the turbo outlet to the downpipe. They welded together this 90 degree pipe with the flange at each side and eliminated the turbo and the intercooler. So I'm given this car. It runs. Needed a little work to get running. I knew nothing about it, but even in horrible condition with like electrical problems and no turbocharger and all this stuff, I like totally clicked with the car. It was amazing. And Randy Richards, the owner of this place, says to me, you know, like Asian cars are fine cars. You know, they're like a toaster or a washing machine or a refrigerator. You know, they do their job, they do it well, they're inexpensive to repair, they're reliable, you know, but it's more of like an appliance, really. You know, a European car, you know, like a Saab or a BMW, these like older kind of what are now classic European cars, were developed more to give like a driving experience to the driver, right? That was more of a consideration in the building of the car than just the rest of it, that it just functioned and functioned well. They wanted that too. They wanted the reliability, but they also wanted to bring a good driving experience and safety and all these other things that Saab was trying to bring forward. So when I drove this car, I was just like blown away. It's very planted feeling car, very precise. The steering, it seemed to handle really well, even with like beat down shocks and, you know, worn out bushings and all this stuff. So I go to Tom Townsend and I met Tom Townsend in person. Randy knew him, and I drive out there and I meet Tom Townsend and I pull a turbocharger off an 8-valve, which was a smaller turbocharger, and I put it on there. And I got an intercooler from him and a few things, and I pieced together the turbocharger stuff. And it was like, oh my God, this is amazing, you know? And then, you know, the transmission was bad. So upstairs there was an old automotive brick building dealership that was multiple stories with like ramps that went all the way up to the upper floors. Up in the upper floors of this place were like multiple good, bad, and somewhere in between transmissions in boxes laying around on the floor, parts of them, because this guy did Saab repair for many years, you know. So there were 99 transmissions and 900 transmissions, you know, 5 speeds and 4 speeds, whatever. So I go up there and I load up this cart with about four transmissions, and I come down these ramps that are covered with dust, and this cart runs away on me. And I get pushed, I throw myself in front of the cart and get pushed into a compressor and almost knock the compressor over. I finally get it down, you know, get these transmissions down, and I go in on the weekend and I tear them all apart. And I think the only bearing that I replaced was a pinion bearing. I got a later model transmission, and I looked at all the gears very carefully and mismatched all this stuff. And this first transmission and Saab transmission that I ever built was the longest lasting classic 900 transmission I ever had. It took me a week. You know, it was my first one. You know, on the weekends, took me several days to build this transmission. Later, I got very quick at them. But so I put that in there, and I bought, I think it was from Goldwing Saab. I had them send me down a low mileage used engine. It had like 60,000 miles on it or something. And I put it together. And when I had the engine out, I did all the bushings and all this stuff. And the car became a really nice, like 85 SPG, you know, and it had some weird interior in it. And I got some interior stuff, and one thing led to another. But that was the car that, like, I went on the Saab network with this car and was like, hey, you know, how do I make this thing faster? And I was like asking questions on the Saab network, on the performance bulletin board. And it was not very long before I started to realize the limitations of the stock engine management, the chip that was in it, the Band-Aid sort of tuning that people were doing at the time to like make them faster to deal with fueling and stuff like that. And then I started sort of digging in, you know, and trying to figure out how to do it better, you know, and then Jak Stoll Performance kind of came from that, you know, but that car was like an amazing car. And up until about 4 years ago, I had a white 4-door, like a 1991 900 naturally aspirated, like a 900S, you know, that I did some, like I plated the control arms and put some Bilstein HDs on it, and, you know, did some kind of rally sort of modification to the car, but left it a naturally aspirated, like 2.1 liter engine, you know, and I loved that car, you know. But, you know, I gave it to my wife at one point, who's now lives with me, and was like in the beginning of our relationship, and she had it in Canada, and it had a clutch hydraulic issue, and it would run low on clutch fluid, and she forced it into reverse a bunch of times and like broke and this white car too, I'd gone through very thoroughly. You know, I found a really good transmission for it. You know, I took the cylinder head off one engine and put it on another and got the best, you know, engine together I could for it, did all the bushings, just went through it very thoroughly. And I'd have driven that car back and forth across the country like 10 times and not worried about it, you know. But I finally had to let that one go due to leaving it sitting. The water ingress created so much mold in the car that it was just basically junk, you know. And the transmission was trashed from my wife slamming reversed without good clutch pedal pressure, you know.
I'm gonna go ahead and unmute all of the participants in case anybody's having trouble unmuting themselves. If you have a question, let me go ahead and unmute. Okay, all participants are unmuted. If you have a question but weren't able to, you know, unmute yourself, you can jump in now.
I just want to comment. I love your story, Jack. And one of my favorite marketplaces is I have a very long a loyal following in Santa Cruz, and I've been on. That was one of my when I was first working with terrestrial radio stations. I had 2 independent stations from Santa Cruz and loved the market. Your lifestyle sounds like a great lifestyle, and between surfing and you know, mechanicking and of course Saabs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny now. I have like a very vanilla job, and, you know, I own a house. I have a lot of responsibility, and, you know, it's very different now. But, you know, the rewards that I have, you know, being here for my son, you know, buying a place.
So they did have an updated in 2011.
Oops, sorry about it. Let me mute some people here.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead, Jack.
But yeah, it's very different now. I'm basically like a hippie from the West Coast, right? You know, that's what I am.
You're a super hippie though, and also you have the mystique of being this Saab super tuner. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. So now now my hair I cut with a buzzer. You know, cut my own hair. It's very, very short and probably more resemble a redneck than anything else. I live in Kentucky, and you know, but whatever, you know, and I have this very vanilla, like line technician job. You know, I have a great job. I'm bored out of my mind in it. And, you know, and in fact, the reason I've driven to Ohio is that I'm looking at mills and lathes and, like trying to set up sort of a diverse metalworking shop where I can start doing like tuning and fabrication and some art related stuff, try to like make a very wide envelope of things that I can do. I've worked and got my wife through a PhD at the University of Kentucky in geology, and she's graduated and her career is starting. She has a very low paying job now, but she's on a good path and working with good people, and it's likely to go somewhere. And I'm trying, and I just bought a house with like a 3-car garage behind it. And, my kid he's 16 years old. He's working on his first car, which is not a Saab, unfortunately, but it's a 1977 Datsun 620 pickup. And he's doing all this metalworking, like, building a dash, bezel, like instrument cluster bezel and all this stuff out of 16 gauge steel, and doing these like cardboard templates, and having the space for him to be able to learn to be creative, and work with metal and stuff. And I moved to Kentucky to be close to my son. His mother and I were divorced, and I left North Carolina, to be there for him that way. It's like, yeah, I had a very sort of free lifestyle, when I was younger, but it's like, while sometimes I do feel trapped and a little, stuck or whatever, however you want to say it, the truth is that the rewards, are pretty great. Seeing my wife through a PhD and being here for my kid are
congratulations
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have
Yeah, let's. Let me jump in here. Scott Burnell has his hand raised. Let's go ahead. We're gonna end in a few minutes. So if anybody has some last questions, if you're on a phone, you can unmute yourself using *6, or if you're on your computer, you can do it yourself through the interface or raise your hand. If you're on a phone, you can raise your hand with *9. Go right ahead, Scott.
Go ahead, Scott. I was going to make a super quick comment. I just want to say that Jak reflects so much the path of I think a different breed of person, someone who's I just think Jak reflects a Saab mentality, a Saab, just everything about a Saab is in Jak as a human being, the inquiry, the intelligence, the flexibility. So here we go. I love your story, Jak.
After
please,
Scott,
go ahead, Scott, please.
After Scott goes, we have Mark with the raised hand, so we'll get to his question too.
Beautiful. Please.
Okay, Scott. This is David Marks, friend of Scott's. Has anybody found a good headliner or a system to put in these in the Classic 900? Because we're here in LA, and the heat destroys that little foam fabric and everything. We all know it all comes down. Is there anything to attach directly to the headliner, to the shell that would work? Thank you.
So what I'm familiar with doing is stripping all the foam off the shell, right? And then you buy the material with the foam backing, and you spray adhesive spray onto the shell, and you adhere a new foam and cloth to the headliner shell, right? And then you reinstall it. And that's something that basically you have like I've done them myself, but you can have like an upholsterer do it or something like that.
Is there a
I don't think
on that? Because you see, here in LA, the temperature hits like 100 and something on the roof, and everything gets destroyed here in LA. Plastic, headliners are the first to go.
The foam disintegrates, and then the headliner comes down, and that lasts only a couple of years before that happens.
Yeah.
Is there some people?
Yeah,
We've heard some people taking like a cloth that has a sticky background, and they've just ironed it on. Okay. Is there something like a prep you can do to that shell and then put the cloth on? Because the foam is just, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Right. It's the foam that deteriorates that causes the cloth to drop, so, you can use another product, but generally speaking, headliners are done that way. I mean, I have also, and like a 98 Dodge truck, like a 12 valve 1-ton truck sitting in my driveway at home, and the headliner's falling down on that one. I mean, it's the same sort of material that was used in classic 900s and many other cars that the headliners fall out of. You know, this is a problem for many, many cars, you know, not just Saabs. And, you know, I don't know. I would Google it, honestly. I would get on and try and Google it and find out what some people do.
Yeah, we have the same problem with my wife's Jetta. And by the way, to address somebody, when you talked about investing in a car in the Saab or so, my solution has been always make sure that my wife's car is in tip-top condition. And then
Good man.
Happy wife, happy life, as they say.
Absolutely.
And that's how I'm able to have my classic Saab in an Alpha, you know, because
There you go.
She's happy.
Okay,
Yep.
Mark, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, and I'll make a quick comment on the headliner before I get to my question, because I lived in Utah, Arizona. I'm down here in Texas now, and I totally understand them with the heat. But and I tried replacing it myself, and you're right, the foam does disintegrate. And I finally ended up. I remember my grandmother using these screwed-in pins to hold, like, on the couch arms. I can't remember what you called it. If you go to like Walmart or something like that, you can get those pins that actually have a little corkscrew to them. And so I went in and kind of made it look like a pleated rooftop there. So that's one way to keep it up and not have to worry about falling down. Real quick, I came across this last night. I was doing some research. I've got a couple Saabs. Right now I'm working on a 91 900. It's just aspirated. I love the thing, 213,000 miles on it. But on the instrument cluster, it kind of, the tachometer will quit on me a little bit. And every once in a while you could tap the dash and make it work or reach through the speaker. And I was just wondering if anybody knew of a good, reliable instrument repair service. I found one called Southern Electronics up in West Virginia that says they can maybe take care of something like that.
Yeah, you know, actually, I had my Sonnet tachometer replaced. I'm looking up it right now. They did a great job on it. It's if you look up for Palo Alto speedometer on the internet, it's paspeedo.com. I bet you that they would be able to do it.
I think it's just an intermittent problem with that circuit panel that they use on the backside is what I'm thinking.
Right. I don't know. You know, you'll have to ask them. The Sonnet. You know, it was in mine. It was a problem with the actual tachometer. You know, I had to pull that out of the dash. Because it was in. You know, they took that apart and fixed it, and so it was very mechanical. And so I don't. You know, you'd have to contact them and ask them if they would be able to do a 900, but maybe.
Cool.
And then let's see. We have a question from Bill Hansen. Let me unmute you, Bill. 1 second here. All right, you are unmuted. Let's see.
Scott, I just want to go right to Chris quickly. Chris, do you have a comment on the headliner situation in the 900? And also give out your website. A lot of people are asking for your contact. So
yeah, just
any comment about the headliner?
No, I basically just taking the shell out, cleaning off all the foam, and then re-gluing it. That's the only thing I've done.
Okay.
Yeah, that's had to be one of the most most oft asked questions in the early days of Saabnet was headliners.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can't
give out your website too, Chris. For people who want to be in touch with you.
It's just RizzonSaabRepair.com.
RizzonSaabRepair.com in Dorset, Vermont, beautiful Vermont. Jack, you too. Why don't you go ahead, Jack? Give out your contact.
So my website is hosted by Scott and has been since day one. Thank you very much, Scott.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's great.
From day one, and it's Jack with no C, JAK STOLL PERF, short for performance.com. It used to be jakstollperformance.com, but I guess the URL expired, or I forgot to pay it or something like that, and somebody snatched the name, and then they wanted like $350, for the name, and so Scott and I came up with the idea for Jak Stoll Perf just to shorten it up, and so yeah, jakstollperf.com. You can email me at jakstollperf@gmail.com. And I'm happy to answer any, questions through email or whatever. That's no problem at all.
Do we have a question from Bill Hansen?
Yeah,
Welcome,
can you hear
Bill.
me?
Yes.
Okay, we have 4 C900 turbos, which I maintain myself. And my question regards T5ing the C900. My 93 turbo has red box, 2.8 fuel pressure, a tweak distributor using the extra spring. It's pretty fine tuned and runs really, really well.
Awesome.
And it runs so well, I'm questioning what the value of T5ing it would be.
Yeah, I never put Trionic 5 on a Classic 900 before, honestly. I never did that. And, while I think Trionic 5 is an amazing engine management system, a couple things. One is the boost valve, the boost pressure control solenoid, and the DI cassettes are kind of expensive. So while I think that LH, and particularly so LH for a few reasons, and it being a batch fire system with a hot wire air mass meter, which is very limited in how much volume of air it can measure, actually. So there's a resolution issue with making much power with the engine management system for those two reasons. It's a single batch fire system, and the air mass meter doesn't measure much air. Thirdly, the fact that you're using a vacuum diaphragm to control ignition timing on a turbocharged car, that's like total caveman stuff, like sticks and rocks, right? So, but it works, and I'm not saying anything bad about your car. It's just very antiquated equipment. And so if I were like starting from scratch with a Classic 900 and trying to make power, I would probably use like Mega Squirt or something. Like I have Mega Squirt in the car that I'm sitting in right now, and it's relatively easy. There's a relatively easy to tune. It's designed to be tuned instead of having, like with Trionic 5, to rely on somebody who knows how to tune it or learn to use like T5 Suite or some obscure bit of software like Mega Squirt and other standalone engine management systems that are universal and designed to be tuned are very ergonomic and user friendly, right? So all the, that first hurdle of like wiring it into the car and figuring out if you're going to batch fire or, do like a waste spark ignition system or coil over plug or coil near plug or however you're going to sort that stuff out, how many batches you're going to run the injectors on. You have to sort through a few decisions in the process of like putting a standalone on, but probably going with something that is designed to be tuned. And the reason I like Mega Squirt a lot is because it's used widely. There's a lot of information out there on it, like forums and things and help, and people like me and other people that you can get in touch with that can help you get it set up. One of the big obstacles, no matter what you do with that car, is coming up with a tone ring for the crankshaft, right? You're going to have to, and also if you decide to do anything more than a waste spark system on the ignition side of it, you're going to have to come up with some kind of cam angle sensor as well. But you could use the distributor from the standpoint of only distributing spark, not dealing with ignition timing in any way, and use the Mega Squirt to deal with the ignition timing and have like real 3D mapping, and you would be using a map sensor instead of a air mass meter, you know, a hot wire air mass meter, and you can, you know, then move a lot more air and have good resolution, you know. So
Okay, thanks.
that's the long.
Not really looking to
That's
turn
the
it into a rocket ship. Just was wondering more about reliability.
Yeah.
I had a question, quick question. Since Jack and Chris don't have any affiliation with AMSOIL, I got another AMSOIL question. Before Dave kind of retired, he told me that he pulled apart a few engines that are 400,000 miles, and then in fact, he thought AMSOIL made a big difference in longevity and performance. Is it all hype, or is there anything to it, Jack? Don't go to Chris. Is there anything to AMSOIL being a superior engine oil, motor oil that does make a difference in longevity and performance, or is it's kind of a hype kind of thing?
You're asking me?
Yeah, let's go to Chris first. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure it's probably a very good oil. I don't. I've heard good things about it. But with it, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
I actually have in my in that first Saab I had that 85 900 sedan.
Yeah.
I ended up with with Lazo. We put AMSOIL in that thing. It had over 100,000 miles, and I often hear, be careful about putting that in an older engine because it's so viscous. It's so viscous that if you have leaks. But I didn't have a problem. It worked great. It was fantastic oil for me.
Jack, what's your take? I trust you. You seem so. What's your take on any oil? But AMSOIL is that and Royal Purple are the ones that a lot of people have. They have huge followings and huge fights about what's real. What's your take? Anything that you use that you really see made a difference, particularly in older engines, by the way, particularly.
Yeah, I've read a little bit about like synthetic oils and high quality oils. I can't really speak to. I don't think I've ever used AMSOIL in anything. Period. So I can't really speak to that product specifically. But I've seen a lot of like arguments on the internet about oil and synthetic oil and dinosaur oil and this and that. And kind of going back to our last conversation when we were doing this, the thing that I think is important that I see as sort of a problem is, like, for example, at work, some of the cars I work on have like 15,000 mile oil service intervals, which I think is ridiculous. And so no matter how tight an engine is, and granted that, modern engine management and combustion chamber design has led to like cleaner burning and less hydrocarbon going out the pipe and blowing past the rings into the oil. Nonetheless, oil gets dirty in large part due to carbon entering the oil past the rings from combustion, right? So this is how the oil becomes dark in color and all that stuff. And carbon is a particulate material, right? So this particulate is in the oil and it's, abrasive and it's, grinds up the engine basically very slowly. And I think keeping oil clean is the thing. And, I do have a bit of that, hippie environmental thing where, you don't want to throw away, change your oil every other week and like, whatever, be bad to Mother Earth or whatever. But like, also, I think, changing your oil at crazy long service intervals because you're using really high quality oil is not a good idea either, So there probably is something to using high quality oil. And I think there is also probably something to changing your oil frequently enough that you don't have enough of this carbon particulate that it's like grinding your engine up, So that's sort of what I feel about it.
We have we're going to try to get to these three questions and finish up because we've been on for an hour. But I'm going to unmute Mark. You're up. Do you have a question?
No, I'm good. I didn't.
Okay, I saw your hand raised. How about let me see, Sandy? Let me unmute you. Okay, Sandy, go ahead.
I've got a 93 900, had a wiring harness fire from the junction box back to the ignition. I was just wondering, it was an aftermarket ignition, probably had something to do with it. But was wondering if that portion of the wiring harness could still be purchased from anywhere, or if right now I've kind of rebuilt it a little bit myself. And then second part of the question is, in order to route it back through the firing wall, I assume you have to take the entire dash out to do that. Is that correct?
I don't think so. It's been a long time and I don't really remember, but I for some reason, I think you can like undo the rubber or grommet under there. Like if you look up from where the control unit is on the kick panel on the passenger side, like remove that bit of steel trim with like the 3 screws in it, like you're getting to the ECU, and then kind of follow the engine wiring harness like up through there, and then I think that you can. Yeah, I think you can. I think you can like pull the harness out through the engine compartment, but I'm not sure that so from the power distribution box over there, so it's the other side, meaning on the driver's side, right?
No, the junction box on the power junction box on the passenger side.
Right. So yeah, because it goes in the loom, so it didn't wreck a bunch of other wires and stuff. It just melted like a couple wires, like took the insulation off or something, or.
The main power wire melted completely, and then melted the rest of the wires that are in that loop back to the ignition, basically in a big mass.
Yeah, I have no idea where you would come up with that harness except for buying it, finding a car, a used one in a car somewhere and pulling it out and putting it in. And I would probably do what you did, like, try to do a quality job of repairing the harness one way. Like my first car being an 85 SPG, the wiring insulation was basically a biodegradable material that like fell apart, and the harnesses were awful. And I had to rebuild pretty much the whole harness, right, from like the bulkhead out, like, run individual wires out to each component and whatever, it was a nightmare. But I did finally get it sorted out, and it was quite reliable, but, you just have to kind of get in there and do quality work, and it takes a while,
Chris, did you have any comment on that? Still there, Chris?
Oh, yeah.
I just don't know if you want to.
You might. No, I was just thinking you might try Goldwing. They might be able to get you a harness.
Yeah, Goldwing has a lot of spare 900s. Definitely give them a call. Yeah.
Check with them.
And then let me see here. We have we have two since we have two Saab Master Techs here. I have two people who have one James Richardson. I'm gonna unmute. Let me see if there he is. He actually has a 97 900 question. I thought since you're here, maybe we could go ahead and help him out. James, you're unmuted.
Hi, I have a 97 900 turbo, and I changed the fuel pump twice. And I jumped the fuse from number 4 to number 32, I believe it was. And I got power to the fuel pump for about a minute. And I'm stuck trying to get this fuel pump working.
Chris, it's a 97. It's a 97?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a new Gen 900. So yeah, I mean, you have to go to your fuel pump relay and determine what, is it getting a signal? Because the relay is latched.
Excuse me. I put in another relay.
I know, but what I'm telling you is how to check whether you're getting a signal from the control unit to start the relay. So what you need to do is determine, there's like whatever, like 30 and 87, and then the other two, right? So 30 is the power in, 87 is the one that's probably going to the fuel pump, and then the other two are latching the relay, right? So it's like a 4-pin relay, I believe.
Okay.
And so
I know what you're talking about.
Actually,
right.
I think when you jump it in the fuse box, you bypass the relay.
That's exactly what yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I think you got to have a bad connection going back to the pump somewhere. I'm not sure where, but.
Okay, well, I'll just explain
what I was getting at was I would go to the relay and see if you have power in, and then I would see if you have continuity between the power out from the relay and the pin at the pump, the power pin on the pump. Make sure that you have a good ground at the, between the ground pin at the pump. What?
Check the resistance.
I don't like using, so listen, I don't like using ohm meters. So what I do is current, or voltage drop testing across the circuit. So I'll take a voltmeter and I'll say it's in this case, right? I may back pin the relay on the output side. If I know the relay is being latched and it's putting power out to the pump and I'm not seeing voltage at the pump, say that's the case. Then I'll take a voltmeter and I'll put it to 12 volts DC, and I'll put one of the probes up by the relay. I'll back pin the relay, and on pin 87, I'll put the one probe there, and I'll put the other probe at the pump where the power feed is directly at the pump. And if when the pump tries to fire up, you see 12 volts across that circuit, the voltage is being consumed by something along the way, meaning an open circuit of some kind, and then you can basically work the ends towards the middle until you find the problem, right? The problem with ohm testing is when the circuit's not loaded, it may have a reasonable amount of resistance. Like if you have a connection somewhere or something like that, you use an ohm meter, and yeah, you might have a little bit of a flaky, it may not be like, 1 or 2 ohms or whatever from the front to the back. Maybe it reads a little high, but you're like, it has continuity. It should work, right? So you can do this the same on the ground side. You can go from the pump ground and go to the body or to the battery negative, right? And try to fire up the pump. And then if you see 12 volts, then you work the ends towards each other until you find the open circuit, right? So I am a big fan of voltage drop testing. It's actually something that I learned in 2000. I was taught it by the foreman of Precision International when I was talking about when I first got my first Saab. The foreman there was a very smart diagnostician. It's something that he turned me on to. And also in BMW training, they're really big on voltage drop testing. So I'm not a fan of ohm meters, but in this particular case, they're good for like a quick check, but I wouldn't really rely on them entirely. For this case, what you need to know is if you have power into the relay, if you have power onto the side of the relay where the power goes that the relay is latched, and then you need to know that you're getting the signal to latch the relay. And then you need to know that the continuity is good between the pin 87 or whatever, the output side of the relay to the pump, that there's continuity there. So you just have to sit down and look at a wiring diagram and suss it out. Like if you just throw parts at something, you often find what you did. Oh, it's not this. Oh, it's not that. But what is it, right? You actually have to do diagnostic steps to find out what the problem is,
Okay. Thank you very much.
We have one, our final question today is from Rick Foster. Let me see if I can get you unmuted. All right, Rick, go ahead.
Hi, if it's okay to ask a 9.5 question.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so I've got a 2002 9.5 wagon, 3.0. God, I love it. And I started having a really loud tappet sound. I think I've located which one it is. And I want to know what the consensus is on when it comes time to redo my timing belt. Should I go after switching out the lifter?
Chris?
That would be a good time to do it if you're doing the belt. If you know which lifter it is.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain. And it kind of bums me because it was a silent engine before, but now it's annoying.
Yeah, I mean, if you got, once you have the belt off, it's you got to take the belt off anyway to take the cam out.
Right.
So that would be the time to do it.
All right, thanks. One last one is that I had that changed out my, oh shoot, getting lost trying to do this so fast here. My washer fluid bottle is always reading low, and I changed out the SID. Is that a problem that I can fix by switching the wires around?
So it's always telling you that you're low washer fluid.
Right,
message.
right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it could be the sensor in the tank, but also if the SID's ever been switched in that car.
It has.
It has been. So what you may have to do is reprogram the SID. I've run into that where you switch the SID and it keeps telling you got low windshield washer fluid. And what I've been able to do is to just go in and reprogram the SID. You'll need a Tech 2 to do it, but
I have a Tech 2. You can do that?
Yeah.
All right, thanks. I haven't found how to on any of the sites, but I'll go looking at it again. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I just mentioned a note about Tech 2s. There's if you go to buddy.saabnet.com, it's the Saabnet Buddy Registry, or the Saabnet Buddy Registry. You can list yourself as a number of things. As a Saab person who will help another Saab person who's traveling through your area who runs into some trouble, car trouble. You can also register yourself as a Saab person who's willing to go look at local Saabs for sale that other Saabers who are not local are interested. I did that with my Aero. I bought it out of Colorado. I had another SaabNet member go do the test drive for me, and that worked out fantastically. You can also list yourself as having a Tech 2, and there's a whole bunch of SaabNet members, SaabNet site users who are listed in there with Tech 2s all around the country. So Glenn, I'm going to turn it back over to you to finish up for us.
Thanks. First of all, I want to say I loved our bigger conversation today. I love I think part of the whole Saab community, I just love what Scott is saying. I just think that the more we could, be cooperative and in some sense that was the whole Saab thing. I'm retro today. I'm retro. Jack, I loved your personal story today. I was wondering who is Jack, the slinger, the famous tuner. So that was fun to learn more about you and where you're coming from and your in-depth education and experience. Chris, as always, an absolute pleasure catching up with you again. I thank you all for your great questions, for participating. I'm eager for next session. We're going to go into brakes. We'll get more into the 900s, probably tapping a little to the 9.5 and hear your questions. And I appreciate very much you being on the show. And again, I love this, Scott. It's so wonderful that we're here today going through another challenge, and yet we got these cars that are so valuable. And I send my best to you guys. Be well, be safe, and thank you very much for listening today. And please stay tuned. Scott will let you know about our next Saab and Travel show. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Jack, very much, and thank you, Scott, and everyone, all you guys.